Hello again. I shall have to choose my words very carefully when talking about this subject, because there are those who are convinced that I am an apologist for abusers, a man who feels that the whole subject should be swept under the carpet and ignored. The reason for this is, of course, because I have mentioned that some experts feel that the real trauma caused to children by abuse is often the hysterical reaction of their parents and other adults when they find out about the business. This can prove more disturbing to a child than the incident itself. Because this is such a delicate subject, I've written a fairly lengthy essay about it, explaining why so many old men, the generation to which people like Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris belonged, honestly thought it was okay to abuse children. Some younger people who grew up in the 1970s acquired this awful perspective too, because it was rife then. Huw Edwards grew to adulthood in the 1970s, and he's one of those who acquired, by osmosis, a terribly skewed perspective about sexual matters, especially as they related to young people and children. This is not, of course, meant to exculpate him or make excuses. I'm simply explaining how things were. Of course, the overwhelming majority of us who lived through the 1970s did not become abusers. But of course, we too were exposed to a horribly toxic and unhealthy attitude towards young girls, and some of it is bound to have rubbed off on us. It was the background for people like Jimmy Savile, Rolf Harris, and Huw Edwards. Let me give one example, which I also mention in the essay of mine, to which I give a link in the description to this video. The idea that girls of 12 were legitimate objects of desire for grown men was common throughout the 20th century. Within the lifetime of people still living in this country today, it was possible for a grown man in Britain to be married to a girl of 12. It was not until the 1929 Marriage Act that this situation changed and the minimum age for marriage was raised to 16. It, in 12-year-old girls were getting married in this country in the 1920s. Still, this was a long time ago, wasn't it? Here's an example of how this attitude that girls of that age were, as it were, fair game for men's fantasies and desires was openly acknowledged in mainstream culture in the 1970s. A very popular sitcom in the 1970s was Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads with James Bolam and Rodney Bewes. In the episode broadcast on the 27th of March 1973, Terry and Bob, the central characters, talk about their favourite sexual fantasies. Terry says that, "Sometimes I'm the new master at a girls' high school." Bob understands this perfectly, replying, "Yes, gym slips. I've been worried about that. I think the sexiest TV programme is Top of the Form, not Top of the Pops." The quiz programme Top of the Form featured teams of school children aged between 11 and 16. The fact that a man approaching 40 could describe the sight of underage girls as being sexy in this way and raise a laugh from the audience tells us something about the mores of those times. It was in such an atmosphere that people like Huw Edwards grew up and men like Jimmy Savile flourished. I explore this idea in great detail in a piece on Substack to which I give a link. I dare say that this will, as so often happens when I discuss this topic, end up with people claiming that I'm making excuses for those like Huw Edwards, but nothing could be further from the truth.